Have you ever wondered how the relationships we form in early childhood affect us later in life? This is my baby Violet. At only 2 months old, her emotional security is already being shaped as we work together to build a foundation of love and trust. The first few months of life are crucial for future development. Babies who form strong bonds with their primary caregivers feel safe, secure, and more confident when facing the outside world. On the other hand, babies who experience inconsistent or weak bonds with their caregivers can feel uncertain, which may lead to emotional instability. Developmental psychologist John Bowlby, the founder of attachment theory, explained that our ability to trust others and build relationships begins with the groundwork laid in infancy and childhood. As a mother, I wanted to understand how early daycare experiences can influence attachment and development for long term social and emotional outcomes. I'm going to put Violet in her crib. We can watch her on the baby monitor and see how she does when I leave. Before we dive into the research, let's first define what attachment is and how it develops. Attachment theory explains how babies form emotional bonds with their caregivers. We've talked about how consistent, responsive caregiving helps babies develop a sense of security. But what happens when the primary caregiver isn't the person who's meeting the baby's needs throughout the day? Does daycare affect this process, or is attachment security based on something deeper? One of the most well-known studies on attachment was conducted by Mary Ainsworth through the Strange Situation experiment. Ainsworth found that babies react differently to separation based on their attachment style. Securely attached babies show distress when their caregiver leaves, but calm down quickly when they return, showing trust. Avoidant babies don't seek comfort from their caregiver and may seem indifferent to separation. Ambivalent babies become highly distressed when their caregiver leaves and struggle to calm down even after they return. Disorganized babies can be unpredictable, usually because of inconsistent care. To better understand how early attachment can shape emotional development, let's take a look at our first video, which explores how attachment security in infancy can impact emotional well-being, relationships, and even physical health later in life.
The long-term effects of our attachment in the early years are well documented. Using the theory, researchers at Minnesota University were able to predict already at age 3 if a child would drop out of high school with 77% accuracy. In another study, undergraduates at Harvard were asked to assess how close they felt to their parents. 35 years later, they were asked about their health. 91% of those who said they had a rather broken relationship with their mother were also diagnosed with health issues, including coronary artery disease, hypertension, and alcoholism. For those that had reported a warm relationship, the figure of poor health diagnosis was just 45%.
The video highlighted how early attachment patterns shape us later in life, influencing emotional well-being, relationships, and even physical health. If early attachment is so important for long-term development, then what role does daycare play in this process? That brings us back to our key question. If daycare plays a role in forming early attachment bonds, how might it impact emotional security in the long run? Let's take a look at what the research says. For decades, researchers have debated whether daycare negatively impacts attachment security. Developmental psychologist Jay Belsky was one of the first to suggest that spending long hours in daycare might be a risk factor. Belsky's research found that infants who spent more than 20 hours per week and full-time daycare had a higher chance of developing insecure attachment. He also linked extensive daycare hours to behavioral issues like aggression and disobedience later in life. His concern was that frequent separation from primary caregivers might weaken attachment bonds. But not all research agrees. A long-term study by the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development, NICHD, found that the quality of daycare mattered more than the number of hours spent there. In high-quality daycare settings where caregivers are warm and responsive, children developed a strong social and emotional skill while still maintaining secure attachment with their parents. This research suggests that while daycare may pose some risks, its effects depend largely on the quality of care provided. Let's check on Violet. She is happy and content. So let's move on to my next point. If daycare carries some risks, does that mean it can't be beneficial? Not necessarily. Research suggests that babies can form secondary attachment bonds with daycare providers. While these don't replace the primary caregiver bond, they can still provide security and emotional support when caregivers are responsive and consistent. A study published in Early Child Care Experiences and Attachment Representations at age 18 years by Howes and Spiker found that babies can develop attachment bonds with their daycare providers. While these attachments are usually weaker than those with a primary caregiver, they still contribute to emotional development. This is why choosing the right childcare setting is so important. While daycare can offer benefits, a baby's primary caregiver remains the most important influence on attachment security. Now let's take a deeper look at how daycare quality and accessibility impact child development. Not all daycares are the same, and that makes a huge difference. Deborah Lowe Vandell, a professor of education and psychology, has spent decades studying the long-term effects of daycare. Her research shows that high-quality daycare supports school readiness and social skills through structured activities and responsive caregivers. To see how early childcare experiences can impact long-term success, let's take a look at another short clip.
Among other findings, we found that the quality of early childcare was related to standardized reading and math achievement scores prior to kindergarten, and then again in the elementary grades, grades 1 through 5, and then again at age 15. Center-type care was related to achievement scores prior to kindergarten and then at age 15, but not in elementary school. At the end of high school, we found that both quality and type of early care were related to outcomes such as class rank, college admissions, and academic grades.
The second video highlighted how the quality of early childcare is linked to higher achievement in reading and math, not just before kindergarten, but through high school. By graduation, both the type and quality of early care were connected to class rank, college admissions, and academic performance. But not all families have access to high-quality daycare. A report from the One Place Family Justice Center found that many low-income families rely on lower-quality daycare centers that may not provide enough emotional support. If a child already faces instability at home and lacks consistent care at daycare, they may be at an even greater disadvantage. At the same time, high-quality daycare can be a proactive factor. W. Stephen Bennett, an early childhood education expert, explains that programs like Head Start help close developmental gaps by providing social and academic support. When done right, daycare can reinforce healthy development. So what does this mean for attachment security? The NICHD Early Childhood Care Research Network states that high quality daycare does not interfere with secure attachment as long as a child has a strong, consistent bond with their primary caregiver. Now let's go back to the nursery. One of the key things about secure attachment is that babies learn to trust their caregivers will return. And look, Violet did great while I was away. She wasn't upset because she knew that I always come back. That's exactly what secure attachment looks like in real life. It's not about never leaving. It's about creating a strong, trusting bond so whenever we step away, our child feels safe. So what did we learn? The debate over daycare versus staying home has been around for a long time. But what really matters isn't where a child spends their time, it's how they're cared for. Research shows that secure attachment comes from consistent, loving, and responsive caregiving, whether from a parent or a daycare provider. High quality childcare with warm, attentive caregiving can still support healthy attachment. We saw in the first video how early attachment patterns shape emotional well being and relationships, even long term health. That's why it's not just about daycare or staying home. It's about making sure that wherever a child is, they feel safe, loved, and supported. As a mom, this is reassuring. There's no right way. What matters is that children receive the love and stability that they need. I hope this presentation helped clear up some of the confusion around daycare and attachment. At the end of the day, what truly shapes a child's future isn't the setting, it's the relationships that build their security and trust in the world. And most importantly, parents shouldn't feel guilty for choosing daycare or staying home. What matters is making sure their child feels safe and loved and supported. Thank you for watching.